Hey guys, let's check out this Khan Academy exercise, graphing sinusoidal functions. So whenever you're graphing sinusoidal functions, which just means we're graphing a sine or a cosine graph, you need 5 different things. You need the amplitude, the midline, the period, the shape of the graph, as well as the phase shift. All right, so let's go through this equation and grab these different pieces. So for the amplitude, you need this number in the front. It's always the number in the front, the 2. You need the midline, which is -1, the number at the end. And then the period of this function is always going to be a formula, 2 pi divided by b, where b you get from your function is going to be this number in front of x, which is the 1/2. So 2 pi divided by 1/2 is going to be 4 pi. All right, and the shape of the graph, by that I just mean, is this a sine or a cosine graph, and what does that look like? A cosine graph is what we're trying to graph, but what does a cosine graph look like in general? If we try to plot its midline, so a cosine graph has a midline, it's got a max and a min, and it bounces back and forth between that max and the min, but cosine always starts at the maximum, it goes down to the min and comes back up. That's one period of cosine, and that pattern repeats over and over and over again. All right, so that's one period of cosine. That's what its shape looks like. All right, and then for the phase shift, there's always a plus c here in these equations. For this case, there is no c. There's nothing we're adding to that x. C is 0, so the phase shift is 0. It's not applicable. We're not going to move it. All right, so let's see how to graph this thing using this information. Let's start off with the midline. That's always what you want to start off with. So that's a -1. Draw a big flat line at y equals -1. That's the middle of my cosine graph. Then we have the amplitude, and that'll tell me how to find the max and the min. So if the amplitude is 2, I'm going to count up 2, count down 2, and then that's going to be my boundaries. So my cosine graph is going to bounce back and forth between -3 and 1. All right. Now we've got our period is 4 pi, right? But the shape is cosine. So that means I'm going to start at my maximum on the y-axis. I'm going to go all the way to 4 pi. That's one period, so that's where it's going to end. And halfway is going to be where it touches the minimum. I'm going to go down, come back up, just like we said the shape would look like. All right, and the phase shift is 0, so I'm not going to shift it left or right. All right. Yep, no shifting left or right. And so then how do I move my green points to match this graph? Well, I want to move this top point here to this maximum, and then my midpoint is the second green dot. I'm going to move that to this midpoint here on my graph. So what are those 2 points? I'm just going to move my 2 green points to these points. The first one's going to be 4 pi 1, and the second one's going to be at 3 pi -1. All right, so we'll move those 2 green dots to those 2 points, and it should create a graph for us. Let's move this guy to 4 pi and 1. Zoom in a bit, and go to 3 pi, -1. Boom, that should be my graph. Let's check it. Nice. All right, next problem. Same situation, right? I need an amplitude, midline, I need my period and my shape and my phase shift. I can get all that from this function. So the amplitude is going to be this 5 in the front. The midline is going to be the -4 at the end. The period, we have to use that formula again. It's 2 pi divided by b. So it's 2 pi divided by b is this number in front of x. So divided by pi over 2. When I divide those 2, I get 4. The shape is going to be, is a sine or cosine? It's sine, right? Sine's got a certain shape. So sine and cosine both have a midline, right? They have a max and a min that they bounce back and forth between. But sine, it starts not at the maximum like cosine does. It actually starts at the midline on the y-axis. All right, then it goes up, it comes back down, and it goes back up. All right, but in that, there's a length of 1 period. And that pattern repeats over and over again. All right, and the phase shift is that plus c that comes after the x, which is not there. So the phase shift is 0. It doesn't apply in this problem. So we're not going to shift it left or right. All right, so let's put all this together. So let's do the midline first. It's a good point of reference, so I'll draw a midline, flat line through -4. Got an amplitude, just means I'm going to count up 5 and down 5. All right, and that'll be the maximum and the minimum of my function. It's going to bounce back and forth within that little area. All right, now our period, we said was 4, and the shape of this is sine, right? So sine, we said, starts at the midline on the y-axis. It's going to go up to the max, down to the min, and then back up again until it hits 4, which is the period. It's the length of one period, right? So we're going to divide this into 4 pieces. We've got a max, we've got a min, and we've got, let's see, one sec. So this is our min, and then our middle point is right here in the midway between the beginning and the ending value, right? So we divide it into 4 chunks. There we go. So that's what one period of this function is going to look like. So how can I graph this? I just need to move my green dots to match this function. All right, and what are those 2 points? So this first point is going to be at 1, 1, and this midpoint here is going to be at 0, -4. I just need to move my 2 green dots to those 2 points. 0, -4, 1, 1. Boom, that should be my graph. Let's check it. Nice. All right, same thing for this next problem. All right, we've got these 5 things we need to find. Let's get that amplitude first. So I'm gonna grab that 4 in the front, that's my amplitude. The midline's the +2 at the end. And my period is 2 pi over b. So 2 pi over 1/5, which is 10 pi is my period. The shape is a sine or cosine. This is a cosine shape. What does that look like? Let's draw it out real quick. We got my midline, my max, and my min. It's going to bounce back and forth between. And cosine starts at the maximum, goes down, comes back up. And that's one period of cosine will look like that. And it repeats over and over and over again. All right. And the phase shift is that plus c that comes after the x. There's no plus anything after the x. So my c is 0, which means I have no phase shift. There's no left or right shift. So it doesn't apply for this problem. So let's put these pieces together. Let's do the midline first. This is my point of reference. It's at 2. So I move that midpoint up to 2. My amplitude's 4, so I drag that amplitude point up 4. My period was, first we said this is cosine, right? So cosine starts at the maximum on the y-axis. And my period we said was 10 pi, right? But it looks like this graph only goes up to 5 pi, which is halfway. So I'm going to stretch this out so that my halfway mark, which is the minimum, is at 5 pi. Nice. All right, then the last problem, let's do the same thing. All right, so let's get the amplitude, midline, period shape, and phase shift. All right, amplitude 6, midline is -2. Period is going to be that formula 2 pi divided by b, where b is my pi over 4. Right, that gives me 8. And my shape is cosine or sine. This is cosine, right? And the phase shift is the plus c there after the x. Am I adding anything after the x? Nope. So there's no phase shift left or right. All right. And then looking at that shape again, just as a quick reminder, what does cosine look like in general? You've got your midline, your max, and your min. Right? And cosine always starts on the max on the y-axis, goes down and up, and that's your period. That's one period. It repeats over and over and over again. All right, so let's see how to graph this real quick. Let's go to the midline, drag that middle point to the midline, -2. Drag my max point up 6 units from my midline, so up to 4. I'm going to make this start on the positive y-axis because that's how cosine starts. And what's the period? Well, we said the period was 8, which means cosine is going to start up there at the maximum, go down to the minimum, and then come back again. And when it comes back to the maximum, it's got to be at 8. All right, well, guess what? That second maximum is at 8 when x is equal to 8 on the right-hand side there. So it looks like my graph is set up and it's good to go. Let's check it.